Have you ever had the feeling that you were such an imposter that even your imposter syndrome had to be fake? Yeah, I get that. Like, all the damn time. Except I see it kind of differently now than I used to. I'm not saying that it's lessened or even gone to any degree. I mean, if anything, it's mutated into something else, and might even be more intense at times. But I can say that what I feel now is different from how it used to be when I failed at having imposter syndrome. Before we get into that, I guess I should clear up a few things and explain what I mean by imposter syndrome. Because as far as I know, everyone will have a different definition of it. Everyone will certainly have different experiences of it, no matter how they define it. So here we go. The Oxford English Dictionary defines... Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. For the purposes of this video, I'll define imposter syndrome in my own words, which, to reiterate, may differ from yours or anybody else's, and might even be wrong in some books, but it's what I'm going to go with in the context of this rant anyways. So this is how I'm going to define imposter syndrome. It's the phenomenon where a person thinks and feels that they don't meet the criteria for being in the circumstance they are in, despite there being evidence that suggests otherwise. It's the person who thinks they are underqualified for their job, even though they actually are. It's the person who has a prestigious title and feel like they somehow lucked their way into it, or somehow were mistakenly given it. It's the person who feels they're the odd one out in their group, no matter how welcoming everyone might be. Eventually, they'll feel like the disguise will be pulled away, and that they'll be discovered for being not like the others. Worst case, they'll think they don't deserve to be there. That they don't belong. This is where I got stuck, at the times when my imposter syndrome felt the worst it had ever been. I haven't always been in this career that I'm in right now. In fact, up until 3 years ago, at the time of recording, I was actually in a completely different and unrelated field. I'm a little ashamed to confess that I was a typical techie, although I hope that I wasn't completely bro-y. A computer engineering degree from uni, working in a number of tech companies ranging from multinational corporations to scrappy mid-sized startups. Despite the fact that my entire education and work life was dedicated to this field, I still felt that imposter syndrome weighing down on me, no matter where I went. Whether it was the university course that I only scraped by in, or the rejections from job application after job application after job application, there were always things that I could just point at to justify this thought. I didn't just have imposter syndrome, I was an imposter. How else could someone who almost flunked out of uni twice and got rejected by so many companies not be? Yet, I managed to get by for over a decade, even climbing that career ladder and getting accolades for my accomplishments. I'm seriously not saying this to brag or anything. I still doubt that I even deserved any of that. Almost like I have imposter syndrome or something. I'm just saying that even if I didn't always feel like I belonged, by all accounts, there was apparently evidence showing that I was doing just fine. Maybe even better than fine. But that didn't exactly come naturally. I did so many things because that was just what was done in order to get promoted, to get that raise, to get that shiny new job title. And I'm not saying that I would never have done them, nor am I saying that they were all bad things, but I didn't always do them because that was what I wanted to do. It was just what was done. I was just following a script, unlike everyone else. In other words, I felt like an imposter because I was one. I'd infiltrated the ranks of this other world, talked the talk, walked the walk, and followed what everyone else around me did or expected me to, while inside I knew that that wasn't truly who I was. No amount of accolades and praise could rid me of that feeling that it was all just a flimsy cover. And believe me, I tried very hard to get more and more of that external validation to try and squash those feelings. The more achievement badges, the better. Because surely, the more that people acknowledged me for doing the right things, it meant that I belonged, right? Hindsight wasn't 20/20 for me. I'm only coming to the slow and gradual realization now, many years after the fact that it took a mental breakdown in the form of several panic attacks for me to finally make the jump and quit my lucrative tech job. God knows that I probably whined about this to every one of my therapists over the past 10 plus years. The fact that I didn't feel like I was cut out for that career. Things like learning new programming languages just for the hell of it, building personal web apps on the weekend, contributing to open source, or doing coding challenge for funsies. I did them, or at least I said that I wanted to, but either did them half-assed or actually didn't want to, but just said that I did. Because that was what I was supposed to want. Side note, if that kind of thing is your passion, all props to you and keep at it. As I always say, you do you, boo. It turns out that it wasn't just because I wasn't driven enough to do all that. I had a drive, just not for that. Sure, I could spend my time outside of work doing all of these things for work, but not really for work. I mean, sometimes anyways. I did actually end up doing work as well, but that's another matter. But I just couldn't understand. Why? Why should I do all these things that weren't work, but still related to work? Because aside from all those should thoughts, there was also a tiny voice inside me telling me that instead of spending what little time I had outside of work, I could be doing something else. Anything else. There was actually a period when I started at my first job that I actually put art aside completely. Stating the obvious here, but my biggest cognitive distortion is all or nothing thinking, and sure as hell, back then, I figured even doing a little art wasn't good enough. Better to just forget the entire thing. That didn't last too long, but longer than I would have liked, among several other mental health issues that cropped up and got really bad to the point I decided to move to a different continent in an attempt to run from my problems. Spoiler alert, this did not work. I was suppressing that tiny contradictory voice so hard and doing my damn best to ignore it. But I didn't realize that this doesn't mute the feelings. I still felt a great unease deep down, even though on the surface I felt accomplished, because at the end of the day, those achievements didn't actually matter to me. They were like sugary candy. They tasted great, and I got that dopamine spike, but it was of no nutritional value and definitely not filling. And decades later, that voice is now much louder, and I can actually hear what it's trying to say. And now, looking back, no wonder I felt like such an imposter the entire time I wasn't doing art. I was sneaking around, trying to be covert and hiding my true identity from everyone around me. Hell, I remember feeling so often that the word authenticity was thrown around so much at my workplaces, but I couldn't get a good sense of what that even meant. Who was this authentic self that I was supposed to bring to work? As an aside, there's more to this whole authenticity thing that's probably going to be a whole other rant in the future. And turns out that I, the imposter, could go to work, but my authentic self couldn't, because it just wasn't where I was meant to be. So now that I've finally admitted to being a full-time artist, does that mean my imposter syndrome has disappeared? Of course not. But it's not the same. Before, it was fake imposter syndrome, and now it's just garden variety imposter syndrome. And maybe that's progress.